around for 15 years. And the greatest companies are around for 15 years. The greatest companies have very, very, very long time frames. So one of the things that Robert was talking about was, how do you identify, what do VCs look for in identifying great entrepreneurs? One thing that the great VCs look for are entrepreneurs that talk in terms of very long-term horizons. And people that talk about how they can make $1 billion in 2 years, that's usually the first telltale that person's not likely to be successful. So that would be, if you could imagine the number one thing, the number one thing you could do to ensure your success is figure out, what does staying power mean in your space?
It's funny because, they say there's 3 things a CEO really needs to do when it's all said and done. One is, don't run out of money, so you're alive. Number 2 is hire smart people and have some vision. If you have those 3, the rest will work. And one of the things Andrew said, which I think is right, is, so you see waves. And we see waves in this economy, the tech economy, all the time. And the reality is, we'll see another one. There'll be a downturn at some point, and funding's gonna dry up. A lot of great companies get built when those waves happen, funding dries up, they're on the playing field, they've got 12 to 18 months runway. And while everyone else can't get funded, Airbnb is building and building and building. And then you come out of that 08, 09 recession, Airbnb's been building, 06, 07, 08, whatever, 09, they're in a really strong position and they go flying. And, I think this gets back to that timing. But anyway, there's other timing things, but I think that's pretty good advice.
Is there anything you would have done differently? Is there one thing in retrospect you say, what, if we made this one different decision, we could have been?
I don't know. I'm trying to think. I don't know.
Sounds like a no.
I don't think so.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit. So, entrepreneurship can, I know this from my own personal experience, can be a very wearing thing on your family life and your dating life and the home front. I'm curious, after this many years of these experiences, how if you've had a similar experience and how it's affected you personally.
Be honest with everybody that I got married at 47, which was 6 years ago, and now I have 2 boys, happy family, whatever. Andrew's still single as far as I know, and I think I can speak for Andrew and myself to say that I used to think being an entrepreneur meant working all the time and just living it, and weekends, everything. And a lot of girlfriends on Saturday and Sunday could not understand why I needed to go to the office, But I was so passionate about it and so into it. There's always emails, there's always something to catch up on. There's always, heck, I like to go in on Sunday and just clean my desk so I was ready for Monday, organized. And it's crazy. One of the things I discovered after getting married and having kids is I think I'm actually a better entrepreneur, now co-founder and chairman of a company, and even when I was CEO of a company last year, and I'm a better CEO. Why? I think being able to prioritize, delegate, stay calm in all the ups and downs, I think you get that with a little personal life and with something that's pulling you away from the business. Now, it doesn't mean that on your team you don't have some people who are there working like crazy. Right now, Andrew and I are both co-founders and chairman of the company, and there are other people who are the CEOs. My CEO is a 28-year-old kid. He's in the office right now. So.
Is that because you felt like you didn't have the skills, or you're just too old for this shit?
A little of both. One, I like to do this. I like to be home with my family. But number 2, interesting enough, so we're building a mobile app. He's got the product vision. He's native to it. And I trust his product vision more than my product vision. And so he's there with the engineers and working on stuff. And so I think it's really important to not only get some balance in your life, because it might help you as an entrepreneur and a business person, but I think it's also important to get some balance on your team. To know maybe there's some people who aren't going to be there all night and others are, and how do you work together, complement each other?
Andrew, I'll ask you a slightly different version of that question, which is, what did your parents or close friends think of your path, when especially 6 degrees, when you were less proven? Did they think you were nuts?
I went to law school, and I'm a little bit sick, and I graduated with over $110,000 in debt, and I left a law job to start 6 degrees. Funny enough, when you owe $110,000 and then you begin to max out your credit cards, it's not nearly as stressful as I imagine is when you have a little bit of money. But when you have literally no money and you're massively in debt, I had a very different perspective.
You were young.
Yeah. I've taken off prolonged periods of time between businesses, which has been rewarding. But I think balance is very important while you're doing the businesses.
And people respect it. As long as you're getting the job done. I had a situation, so I got married to a woman who's from Argentina, and I was getting a company through the recession, and we had turned profitable, and we were growing, and it was a bad winter, like this winter, in the winter of 09 or 10 or something. I actually went to Argentina for 3.5 months, because it's summertime. When it's winter here, it's summertime there. I worked from there. And the company was growing, and my team was stepping up, and as long as you're getting the job done, there's a lot of room for personal, the eyes are not off the mission. It's just there's respect, and you do it your way, but get it done.
So, on the perspective of what ideas you both chose to pursue most recently, Andrew, you and I were talking to Brian earlier, who opportunistically is pursuing an idea of shutting people around the beach. My first startup was really an opportunistic idea because people couldn't order food online, and we decided to build that company. But now you have maybe the luxury or possibly the wisdom to think a little bit more diligently about the things you pursue. So I'm wondering, when you with Indicative, with Live, what factors came into play to decide what should I pursue next? Do you want a B2B play? Do you want a B2C play? And the kind of businesses that you decided to pursue now versus what maybe you started out with?
I'll tell you the story of Indicative. We have a business analytics company, and we had.
And let me make that full circle and how people in the audience should go about choosing the thing that you spend their tomorrow doing.
Yeah.
By the way.
Do you know? Well, let me, before I talk about the business analytics company. I'm someone who has always walked around with a notebook, jotting down ideas, and have many more ideas than obviously businesses I could start. And for myself, I would have a litmus test. So I would share the ideas freely because I think there's no value in the secrecy and no value in the confidentiality. And if I could remain excited about an idea for 2 months, that was my litmus test. So if I would share it with a lot of people and listen to everything negative they had to say, and it was less being turned off by the negatives that they had to say. It was more that there's always a shinier apple right beyond my reach, and if I move from this idea to the next, I'll be able to touch this shinier object. And when I was able to hold on to something for 2 months, I would stay with it. This most recent business isn't like that. This most recent business, I had this mobile dating company, and one of the things we had to build internally to support the mobile dating company was our own proprietary business analytics solution, because there was nothing in market that allowed us to effectively measure the cost of acquisition we were spending, what the lifetime value was of the users we were acquiring, and what the ROI was on the spend of these people that we're acquiring, and allowed us to look at the churn of our users over time. And so when the time or the opportunity came to sell the dating assets of Meet, Moi, and Match, my co-founder and I bought the assets of the business analytics assets out, and then we capitalized that and started Indicative. But it wasn't so much looking for a business opportunity. I mean, I'm guessing Robert's going to say the same thing. The real genius of this business analytics company, which I couldn't believe more strongly in, isn't really me. It's the co-founder. It's the guy who's the CEO, who's the technology brains, not just the technology brains behind the product, but he's also become the passion and the salesman behind the product. And having looked at hundreds and hundreds of businesses, this was an incredible opportunity for me to say, I've been working with this co-founder for a while, and I want to continue working with him. And he believes in this, and I believe not just in this opportunity, but I believe in him. And I really believe, again, this notion that he and I could stay with this thing for 10 years. And that's a recipe for success.
So there's a couple interesting things in here. Great companies are built by more than one person. And it's often people who have worked together before and know each other. So Andrew's doing a business with somebody that he's worked with, not just on his last business, but even the business before that. They know each other well. Andrew was always the CEO. Now he's letting this other guy be the CEO. It's a great relationship. I started a business with a guy who, I was his mentor. I hired him when he was 23 years old. He worked at my last business, and now we co-founded a company. He's the CEO. So great businesses are built by more than one person, and not just a very dynamic CEO who delegates. But to Aaron's question, for me, and not everyone gets this opportunity, but after a lot of, Andrew and I are serial entrepreneurs, so we run companies and then they succeed or fail, and we have moments in between. For me, I had the opportunity to stop and think about, what is it that I really enjoy doing? What is it that I'm really good at? Because you get to a certain point where you realize you're not good at everything, and you don't really enjoy everything. Like raising money for VCs, I don't enjoy it. I'm okay at it. I don't enjoy it. And what I realized is that I love being at the early stages of technology adoption where innovation is happening, not the maturation of the technology. So if you look at the web, in 1995 to 2000 were the earliest stages of, let's say, the consumer web. And I was there and I was involved in building online communities and advertising, and I loved it because I was educating people and we were trying new things, and it was a spirit of try anything and see if it works. And now it's just cooked a little bit more. And to me, it's a little less interesting. So I knew for my last business, I'm looking out at the world. Where is the world going? Where do I want to be? And how do you keep yourself interested, engaged? And for me, it was obvious that I needed to do something in mobile. And not because mobile is the thing to do, but because it's interesting to me, how is the world going to change because of mobile? And if history is any lesson, and you get good at pattern recognition the more you do this, just like those first 5 years of the internet were important years, but they were just the beginning of, let's say, a 15 to 20 year run. And they were early before there were tools and methods and real systems set up to do everything, like there were no photos. I think we're at the same point with mobile. I think we're seeing mobile applications that are in fact web ideas and web businesses that are on mobile phones, but we don't yet have all the tools and the systems and the methods of doing this business, and that there are things to solve. And there are hints out there at mobile businesses. What is it that makes Uber great? What is it that makes Hotel Tonight great? Are there any common themes going on with these things? And so for me, it was fascinating intellectually, and also just fascinating to, like, this I want to spend my day, what can we build in that space that is going to be relevant? So not everybody gets that, but I do think that everybody in this room, no matter where you are in your career, should think long and hard about, what is it that I enjoy? What is it that I'm good at? Where's the world going? Where's that match? And that's a good place to go. One litmus test, when I used to interview people, when I still interview people, but now you don't get it so much, I used to interview people and ask, so why do you want to work here? And it's 1999, 2000, whatever. People would say, well, the internet's kind of like the place to be. I was like, dong, you're out. If you're here because it's the place to be, that's a very different answer than, I'm fascinated by what we can do with this technology and all the different uses of it. So you have to think about yourself, why are you doing something? And you're going to be much more successful if it's something that you enjoy doing and you're good at.
What about when you're throwing the towel on something?
Ooh. So I'll start with a mistake that I didn't mention before, which is, my first business, I stayed in the business too long out of obligation to employees, out of obligation to investors, out of obligation to customers. And at a certain point,
You stayed there too long, or the business stayed alive too long?
Both. I actually got out of college. Okay, I'm going to date myself. Andrew's a young guy. I'm an old guy. I got out of college in 1983, and I was fascinated by video. people were starting to buy video cameras and recorders, and I started a company that published video yearbooks for high schools and colleges. It was fascinating. I had done it at Duke. It was great. I thought it was the start of the democratization of media. First time people. I stayed in the business 10 years. Working with high schools and colleges around the country, I built a little business. I lived down in Durham, North Carolina. And I was bored. I was ready to move on, but I had, a dozen employees. I had customers. I had investors. And at a certain point, I realized I started writing a novel. I'm like, why am I doing that? I'm like, because I'm bored and I don't want to do this anymore. So at a certain point, I sold the business, didn't make any money off it, but moved on. And anyway, I think that you can stick around too long. And I don't know, investors don't expect you either. I mean, they don't expect you to give your whole life. Now, the last company, I stuck around 8 years because I wanted to prove I could get it through a recession, get it profitable, got it sold. I'm glad I did it. But there are a lot of people who leave quickly. You got to know when.
Yeah, I had.
You've started and dropped business quickly sometimes when you had to.
Yes, I've had a business that just sheer ran out of capital, and we went under, and so it wasn't.
I had a business went bankrupt. You see, we've all had failures too.
The worst thing in the world is to tread water. It's the worst. The worst thing is to neither succeed nor fail. Failure is not so bad. It really isn't. Like, you fail, you pick yourself up, you mourn for a little bit, and then you start again. The worst is people that talk about, I'm going to work on this plan, I'm going to go out and hire, I think I'm going to get more aggressive, and they're one person, or they're two people, and they're talking about the same idea 3-4 years on. My failure, we went out, we raised probably $1 million, hired 15 people. This was in 2001, and for a host of reasons, we were not able to close on a term sheet. And I remember the day we brought everyone in and we said, if you begin this next 2-week period, we do not have the capital to pay you at the end of 2 weeks. And if you don't show up tomorrow, I'll completely understand. And if you do, you should know I'm going to do everything I can at the end of 2 weeks to raise the capital and pay you. And I went to bed that night thinking no one would come into the office. And everyone came into the office. And everyone came into the office for like 3 months. And I missed the 2 weeks and the 2 weeks and the 2 weeks. And at the end of 3 months, it was done. I mean, there was just no more we could do. And it was pretty clear that now not only did we need to raise capital to fund the business on an ongoing basis, we would have needed to have raised capital to back pay people for a prolonged period of time. And so we closed the doors. I don't think I stayed with it too long, but I think it's part of the journey.
Now, I'm going to tell 2 stories about failure and lessons learned and when to quit. So my biggest failure was I had a company that went bankrupt that was very high profile, digital currency space, payment space called Flues.com. Whoopi Goldberg was our spokesperson, 1999, 2000. I think we raised $50 million for it. Front page New York Times, goes out of business. And couldn't sleep the night before I knew that story was coming out. The last day I worked at that business was September 10th of 2001.
Whoa.
And I remember the day vividly because it was pouring rain that afternoon in New York. Pouring rain, and I went and met with the bankruptcy trustee. And the next day, woke up, and it was the first day in many, many years I didn't have a job. And the company was in the hands of the bankruptcy trustee. And I just casually got up, went to the gym. It was a beautiful day in New York, crystal clear. And of course, I got to the gym and on TV, what was going on. Now, it turns out that that company had 300,000 creditors because we had online accounts, and it's the largest number of creditors ever in a bankruptcy. And we didn't even have their physical addresses. We